He slid the folder across the table like it was a used napkin. "Your services are no longer of any value to this company," Darren said, not even looking at me. His tie was loose, like always, one foot tapping, the scent of cheap bourbon barely masked by mint gum. I looked down at the folder. My name, spelled wrong. 6 years and he still couldn't get it right. I tilted my head. "Value?" I said softly, just loud enough for the HR assistant in the corner to flinch. "That's exactly what you're about to pay. 8-fold." He smirked, because of course he did. Darren had that arrogant little lip curl like he'd invented the stock market himself. I stood, calmly, gathered the folder, not because I needed it, but because I always leave a table cleaner than I found it. And when I walked out that door, not a single person looked up. Not a single soul asked what happened. If you're listening to this right now and it already feels familiar, maybe you've been written off by someone who had no idea what you were really holding, hit that like button and subscribe. It tells the team these stories matter. It helps them keep building what corporate types like Darren will never understand. Truth with teeth. Anyway, let me take you back to where it started. Not with the folder, not even with the first warning. It began the day Darren said I was lucky to be here. He said it like a joke. First month on the job, he popped by my desk with that half-drunk smile and said, "You must have really impressed someone in compliance to land a spot here. Risk analytics is a boys' club." I was cataloging derivative exposure across our alternative holdings. 78 entries deep, 4 had incorrect timestamps. All 4 traced back to Darren's desk. I nodded politely, kept typing, and opened a fresh tab. Keel Ledger Deviations. That file grew faster than I expected. Weekly adjustments, shady vendor approvals, odd ledger gaps right before quarterly statements. Nothing technically illegal, just suspicious. My job wasn't to accuse, my job was to record, to observe. So I did. It helped that no one noticed me. My office was a glorified closet, a window that faced another wall. My nameplate had a typo for 18 months. Ms. Alyssa Callan, with 2 L's. I never corrected it. Because people don't look for danger in the ductwork. They look for it on stages, in press releases, on Slack at 2 a.m., not in the woman with the reusable coffee mug and perfect audit trails. By year 2, I had documented every exception Darren tried to bury, every override he authorized without board approval, every emergency budget shift. But I also built continuity logs, verified compliance scripts, tracked internal risk triggers across 6 systems. That's the part no one thought to question. When you're silent long enough, people mistake it for smallness. But I wasn't small. I was calculating. In late 2020, Norum went through an asset class reorganization. Regulators required a designated compliance overseer for high-risk alternative vehicles. The board offered it to me, quietly, off the record, after I flagged a massive error in our synthetic derivatives reporting. It was Darren's error, of course, but they didn't blame him. They promoted me. I became the silent firewall, named officer of record for 5 compliance classes, all while Darren took credit for smoothing out volatility on earnings calls. I never contradicted him. I didn't need to. I was the one who filed the footnotes. And every time he stood in front of investors, smiling like a preacher selling forgiveness, I kept 2 files open on my desktop, Keel Variance History and Clause 4.8D, Retention Escalation. The clause? A buried retention agreement from the audit fix. Quiet, precise, and binding. If they ever terminated me without cause and regulatory gaps emerged as a result, Norum owed me 8 times base comp, full equity vesting, and deferred RSUs unlocked. All signed by Darren. His penmanship looked desperate, slanted, sweaty. I never brought it up, until the folder hit the table. And that, friends, is when value changed hands. Not by force, not with shouting, with a whisper, and a clause they forgot I wrote. And the timer started ticking. The reorg email came in at 4:17 p.m. on a Thursday, late enough to dodge questions, early enough to skip a full explanation. Upcoming optimizations to ops structure, it said in the subject line. I almost laughed. Optimizations. Like we were software, and someone had finally decided to uninstall the patches keeping the system stable. By morning, my team's budget access was restricted. Nothing official, just blank drop-downs where line items used to be. Darren blamed system updates. IT said they were told not to talk about it. 2 days later, headcount review spreadsheets appeared in SharePoint, mislabeled as lunch rotation planning. Sure, lunch. with columns marked redundancy risk and voluntary exit incentive. They never said my name out loud. That's not how they work. Corporate bloodletting isn't done with blades. It's paper cuts, slips in tone. Oh, Alyssa, still here? From a VP I used to train. Disappearing invites, missed calendar syncs. One guy accidentally addressed an email to Team-E. His face turned to chalk when he realized I was copied. And then came the misfire. A junior analyst, poor kid had only been there 3 months, forwarded me a draft document meant for HR. Separation proposal, Tier 2 Ops staff. A spreadsheet with 4 tabs. Column E, row 9, Callan Alyssa. Status, non-core, severance, none if voluntary. There it was. Plain text. They wanted me to walk. That's the game. Force your resignation and save the payout. Legacy overhead, they called it in the hallway. Dead weight behind closed doors. Agile modernization in Darren's slideshow. I opened my original employment letter, scanned straight to the section I'd flagged years ago. Page 6, subclause B. If termination is initiated by employer, full equity, severance, and RSU acceleration apply. But walk out on your own? Nothing. Not a penny. I closed the letter and whispered to myself, not blinking first. The mistake they made wasn't in underestimating me. It was thinking I had nowhere else to go. Darren believed the lie most mediocre men in power tell themselves, that silence means dependence, that calm means you've got no teeth. He'd been laying traps for months, reassigning functions I created, promoting loud talkers with messy dashboards. One of them even asked if I could review her slides real quick before the quarterly. I did, then forwarded them to legal because she was quoting metrics from an unverified source. That source? Darren's fake report. I didn't get thanks. I got a reminder about being a team player. So I stopped playing. I stopped correcting errors. I stopped cleaning up after them. I stopped explaining why trading strategy 6B was non-compliant under current risk thresholds. If Darren wanted to run the firm like a trust fall exercise with no one catching him, fine. Let him fall. Meanwhile, I updated my logs, archived backups, reconfirmed control of my access tokens for the oversight chain, and, quietly, transferred my compliance triggers to a passive state. One trigger, one termination. That's all it would take. HR sent me a friendly check-in invite the following Friday. Virtual, no subject, 10 minutes long. I attended with my mic off and camera on. Smiled when they said feedback is welcome. Took notes when they said they were re-evaluating value alignment. Asked one question at the end. Would this affect our continuity obligations under the 2020 exemption clause? Silence. HR glanced off screen, then they ended the call. That night, Darren made a toast at the leadership happy hour to streamlining, to speed, to trimming the fat, he said, and everyone laughed. I sipped my club soda and left before dessert. Back at my desk, I opened the file one more time. Clause 4.8D, my clause, the one with the payout terms, and just for good measure, I opened the metadata logs. Darren's initials were still there, on every single approval that kept me in place as named officer. He signed me into permanence, and now he was trying to erase me like a typo in a PowerPoint. Except this typo had a trigger, and it was set. Conference room 9A was cold, not just temperature-wise, though the AC vent above had a special talent for targeting the back of your neck like a petty ghost, but cold in that sterile, premeditated way, the kind of room used for NDA signings and offboarding moments. The table had been cleared, no coffee, no pens, just a single manila folder lying flat, my name printed in that generic sans serif font as if someone had actively tried to drain the life out of it. Darren was already seated. Tie on, jacket off, sleeves rolled like he was about to deliver a TED talk on eviscerating careers. He didn't ask me to sit, didn't even nod. He just shoved the folder across the table so it bumped against my hand and stopped. You're no longer of any value to this company, he said. Flat, robotic, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. We've found someone more agile, he added, flipping through something on his phone, not even glancing up. Agile, that word again. The corporate version of you're old and inconvenient, but we're legally not allowed to say that out loud. Inside the folder was a basic security escort form. I recognized the template. I'd helped redline it 2 years ago when we updated policy for terminated employees. There was no severance offer, no final performance review, just a checkbox already marked, voluntary departure, no benefits. I tilted my head, let the silence hang long enough to make the HR lady in the corner shuffle in her seat. Value, I repeated softly. That's exactly what you're about to pay, eightfold. Darren snorted, that smug little exhale he always did when someone tried to challenge him without a title. You going to sue? He asked, finally looking up, eyes lazy, like this was a game and I was bluffing. No. I didn't raise my voice, didn't offer a monologue, just placed my hand on the folder, pressed down once, and slid it back across the table, neater than he had. Then I stood. You're making a mistake, the HR rep said weakly. I'm making room, I corrected. Outside, the floor looked the same. Desks humming, interns typing. Nobody noticed that the woman who held half the compliance structure in her mind was walking out with no announcement. Just a coat folded neatly over one arm, a reusable mug in the other. Security didn't escort me. I waved at the front desk. They waved back. Polite, ignorant. My car started on the first try. The Bluetooth connected, and for the first time in months, I let it play music instead of news. A string quartet cover of Paint It Black came on. I smiled. Halfway down Madison, my phone buzzed. Once. A calendar notification I'd set 2 years ago. Contingency activation point, day 0. I'd never expected to use it, not really. But now the timer had started. When Darren tossed me out without reading the contract I wrote, he didn't just miscalculate. He lit the fuse on his own floor, and I wasn't going to lift a single finger, because everything was already in motion. At exactly 2:14 p.m., Noram's trading floor hiccuped. Not stopped, just twitched. A blip on the matrix no one noticed at first, like a single piano key played slightly off during a concerto. One of the senior traders glanced at their screen, frowned, and hit refresh. The numbers looked normal, but the little warning banner at the bottom read, "Compliance revalidation required." Nobody panicked, yet. By 2:17, it wasn't just one terminal, it was 12. Then 36. Then every screen on the exotic assets side displayed the same glowing orange alert. Alert. Compliance oversight lapse detected. And below it, asset class Alt-Synth Group 04, reason. Officer of record missing. They thought it was a system error. It was pinged, rebooted, nothing changed. Then someone tried to manually override the alert in the holdings dashboard and got blocked by permissions that no longer existed. Because those permissions were mine. And I was gone. Darren was in a strategy meeting with marketing when his phone started lighting up. First one text, then 6, then a direct call from clearing ops. Your name just came up on a trade halt, someone barked. He walked out, annoyed. It's a back-end bug, he said over his shoulder. Reboot and loop legal. But legal was already looped, and legal was panicking. Because 3 separate regulatory bots, our own internal compliance AI, the clearinghouse bot, and one external tracker from the SEC's sandbox program, had all independently flagged our holdings under exception review. Translation: every trade tied to our alternative asset stack had to be either suspended, revalidated, or rerouted through a certified officer. And the only certified officer? Me. I'd submitted the credentials during the 2020 audit cycle, verified against a new risk structure that Darren signed off on in a board memo, thinking he was just approving compliance stuff. That signature sat inside our exemption paperwork, filed federally and confirmed quarterly. Under continuity of oversight, the clause was clear. Noram Capital is authorized to maintain its exposure in Alt-Synth Group 04 only under continuous supervision from its designated compliance officer of record, which was me, not a title, a legal designation. And now that I was gone, that designation lapsed the moment my HR offboarding was logged into the system. At 2:23 p.m., that system pinged back out to our integrated compliance grid. That's when the bots chirped. That's when the dashboards locked. That's when 119.4 million in exposure went into passive freeze. Not wiped out, just paused. And in finance, paused is worse than dead. Darren stormed onto the trading floor like he was marching into battle, shirt unbuttoned, tie swinging. His eyes did a full sweep and landed on Kyle, one of the newer VPs, who looked pale. "Why is this happening?" he snapped. Kyle stammered. It's Alyssa. Her credentials were tied to... "I fired her," Darren shouted. And then, quietly, like an unwanted echo, someone in the back muttered, "That's why." The room went still. The kind of still where people start pretending they're looking at something important to avoid being the next name on the clipboard. Then a new email landed from the internal risk portal. Subject: Oversight credentials. Lapsed impact. Trading lock active. Required recertification or replacement officer of record. Darren's hands trembled slightly as he clicked it open. There were two links. The first, a PDF of the exemption clause with his signature at the bottom. The second, an internal audit log timestamped for 10:43 a.m. that morning, when my access had been revoked. One button, one trigger. The system had done exactly what it was built to do. I didn't hack anything. I didn't plant a virus. I just let their own compliance stack execute what it was designed for. Continuity, remove the linchpin, and the machine halts. By 2:41 p.m., senior counsel was on the line with the SEC liaison, trying to explain the situation. They asked who the backup officer was. There wasn't one, because Darren never thought he needed a backup for someone he planned to discard. And now the trades were frozen, the bots were escalating, and the silence was growing louder than the phones. They hadn't fired me, they detonated me, and the blast radius was still expanding. By 3:08 p.m., the emails weren't requests. They were confessions in disguise. Legal pinged my inbox like I still worked there, as if the woman they'd walked out of the building 4 hours earlier might just swoop in and save them anyway. Subject line: Urgent, Continuity Certification Matrix Request. I didn't reply, because even if I wanted to, I couldn't. I'd revoked my storage tokens the moment HR confirmed my termination. Not out of spite, out of protocol. Same procedure we had in place for vendor access, off-boarded consultants, even board member transitions. It was literally in the handbook I co-authored. Section 6.3.1, Cessation Protocol for Credentialed Oversight Roles. No one else ever read it, but they all signed it. So when the firm's legal ops team tried to open the continuity certification matrix, the one file that mapped every active dependency, audit trail, and risk handoff across our entire alt asset chain, they were met with a very polite system message. Access denied, custodian credentials revoked. Certification status, lapsed. Not expired, not missing, lapsed. Which meant the system didn't think this was an accident. It thought this was a breach. They tried to backdoor it, pulled an old version from the July archive, but that version was incomplete because the full matrix was a living file, updated monthly, time-stamped on chain for compliance integrity. The current version lived only in secured vault storage, and that vault, tied to one user key, mine, they tried to restore from backup, but even the backup chain led them into the same cul-de-sac. Because the system's metadata checksums pointed to an active integrity clause, no modifications without the certified officer's approval. And guess who had certified the approval protocol? Darren. 3 years ago, his initials sat proudly beside the lead authorizer field in the vault's origination entry. Time-stamped, immutable. Right below that were 4 oversight role entries, all highlighted in green, all with my name beside them. Risk Chain Compliance Officer, AltSynth Custodian Continuity, Certification, Lead Oversight Transfer Gatekeeper. No backups. Because Darren didn't want redundancies that could slow down his flash reporting cycles. I remember that meeting like it was yesterday. He waved off the request with a laugh. She's not going anywhere, he told the board liaison. Alyssa is the redundancy. Now, the redundancy was gone, and the chain had snapped. Worse, when they tried to edit the archived version, the file triggered a passive alert to our clearing partner. Just a flag, nothing loud, but enough for the partner to call the firm's broker desk and ask a very specific question. Has your officer of record been recredentialed yet? We show a continuity failure on derivatives exposure. And once that question hits the air, it doesn't get sucked back in. It spreads. The real problem wasn't the frozen assets. It wasn't even the fact that internal systems had gone into lockdown. The real problem was that this lapse, this single oversight removal, had triggered a cascade that exposed just how centralized Darren had let my role become. He wanted agile, streamlined, no bloat, no bureaucratic drag, so I became the whole system. And then I walked out. By 3:27, someone tried to reassign my roles manually. They opened the Vault Permissions module and tried to assign a junior compliance analyst to my oversight slots. Denied. Not because the analyst wasn't qualified, though she wasn't, but because the permission tree required 2 credentialed signatures to approve a transition. One was Darren's, the other was mine. Without both, the change failed. It wasn't sabotage, it was structure. My structure. Legal called the vendor support desk for the system we used, a firm in Boston with a very strict change policy. They asked for emergency override. The support rep responded with the same line I wrote into the onboarding packet. We cannot modify core compliance configurations without both designated officer approvals. If one is no longer employed, the system requires a formal lapse review with notarized board minutes. Board minutes. Not a Slack message, not a panic email, actual minutes. And that takes time. By 3:43, the GC was on the line with Darren in his glass office. People outside could see his face turning shades of red nobody could describe. One hand over the mic, the other gripping the armrest like it owed him something. He wanted a fix. But what he had was a file with his initials, next to every box he had blindly checked, and not a single person left who could make the system listen. At 4:12 p.m., the GC found it, buried 6 folders deep in a drive labeled 2020 Audit Agreements MISC, a place no one ever looks unless they're desperate, which by that point, he was. You could almost hear the breath leave his lungs when the PDF loaded. 1 page, clean, stark, no fluff language, no HR fluff. Addendum to Employment Agreement, Retention Clause 4.8D. Drafted October 2020, signed November 3rd, effective upon termination without cause. The language wasn't vague. It wasn't open to interpretation. It read like a scalpel. In the event of involuntary separation not initiated by the employee, and should such separation result in regulatory exposure, Norum Capital shall release a compensatory sum equal to 8x base salary and immediately vest all deferred equity, including RSUs and profit-linked distributions. 8 times. Plus stock. Plus locked distributions. The kind of clause you never expect to use until the person who signed it becomes arrogant enough to forget it ever existed. And the signature? Darren's. Big, loopy, like he was in a hurry. He initialed each section like he couldn't be bothered, but there it was. DK, right next to the approval stamp from legal. He'd signed it as part of the package they rushed through after the 2020 audit scare, when I single-handedly prevented a regulatory fine by exposing a vendor misreporting $14 million in derivative exposure. I remember the day I submitted the fix. Darren had been sweating through his collar, pacing, snapping at legal. When it was all over and Norum dodged the bullet, he shook my hand and said, "We should lock her down." This was how they did it. Quietly, legally, a clause tucked into a retention appendix meant to be symbolic. Except now, it was real and enforceable. The GC sat back in his chair, staring at the screen like it might blink and disappear. He printed it, slid it into a red folder, carried it straight into Darren's office, and shut the door. They argued. Not loud. They knew the walls were thin, but you could see it through the glass. Darren pacing, hands flailing, shaking his head, mouthing impossible. The GC held up the page and tapped the signature line. Darren froze, then turned and punched the back of his chair so hard it spun halfway around. Meanwhile, on the 4th floor, HR received an internal escalation memo marked High Severity, Class Red. It contained a single line. Initiate payout per clause 4.8D, documentation attached. When I got the email, CC'd only out of obligation. I didn't even open the attachment. I just read the subject line, then clicked archive. I didn't need to reply. The clause was self-executing. No threats, no begging, no courtroom, just protocol. Darren had cut me loose thinking he'd save a few bucks in severance. Instead, he triggered a payout equivalent to a senior exit package from the C-suite. The firm was now legally obligated to wire me the sum within 5 business days or face additional penalties under breach of agreement clauses. They hadn't just fired me, they activated me. The best part? Every lawyer in that room knew it, because it wasn't personal. It was math. And Darren had finally realized he signed the equation that would bankrupt his quarter. At 4:59 p.m., I opened my laptop, not out of spite, not to gloat, just to finish what they started. I crafted 1 email, 1 subject line, no dramatics, no exclamation points, just facts. Subject: Termination consequences, clause 4.8D, enacted 3 attachments, a clean PDF of the signed contract, retention clause bolded, Darren's signature zoomed and highlighted, a screenshot of the system log confirming my credentials were revoked at 10:43 a.m. The compliance report timestamped just after 2:14 p.m., showing the automated regulatory freeze. I wrote 1 sentence beneath them. Please advise on payout timeline, no threats, no bullet points, no warpath, because this wasn't a battle anymore. This was execution. The system didn't care about ego. It only knew what was signed, triggered, and time-stamped. And in that sequence, I had become an obligation they couldn't walk away from. I sent it to 3 addresses: GC at Norum Legal, D. Keel at Norum Finance, HR Exec at Norum Corp. Then I closed the lid, poured myself a drink, nothing fancy, just cold bourbon and a quiet room, and waited. By 5:22 p.m., the reply came in from the General Counsel. We acknowledge Clause 4.8d and are initiating payment processing. Wire confirmation to follow by end of business cycle. Please confirm receipt. No apology, no justification, just pure legal oxygen. The sound of a firm exhaling after nearly suffocating on its own arrogance. I replied once, "Confirmed. Good evening." That was it. No follow-up, no, "let me know if you need anything else." They wouldn't, because they had everything they needed. They just never realized how much of it was sitting quietly in my folder, in my code, in the bones of their compliance architecture. I didn't need a lawyer. I didn't need a headline. I didn't need a second chance. I had the clause. And now they had the bill. 8-fold salary, immediate vesting, deferred equity unlocked. The numbers tallied up neatly in the spreadsheet I'd kept offline for 3 years, labeled "only if forced." And Darren? Somewhere between trying to explain to the board what happened and pretending it wasn't his fault, he'd probably realized the final irony. I never once raised my voice. Never asked for more. Never bargained. Just built the system they asked me to build. Then let it do exactly what it was supposed to do when they tried to delete the one part holding it together. Compliance isn't vengeance, it's gravity. And the fall doesn't stop because you didn't read the warning. At 5:31 p.m. on the dot, the trading floor died. Not like a power outage, not like a crash. Worse, it froze. Every cursor stopped mid-click. Every order queue sat there pulsing with unresolved flags. On the main monitor, a flashing red box overtook the ticker feed. Compliance violation, clearance protocol suspended, exotic assets halted. No one breathed for a full 10 seconds. Then chaos. Phones rang, terminals blinked, Slack lit up like Christmas. Someone shouted over the noise, "Is this a test? Some kind of drill?" It wasn't. The clearinghouse had issued a firm-wide freeze on all Alt-Synth Group 04 trades, nearly $120 million in synthetic holdings, locked behind an automated kill switch tied to compliance validation. And I was the validation, or, more accurately, had been. Someone bolted from the floor, junior VP barely out of business school, and sprinted down the corridor to Darren's office, the sleeves of his suit flapping like a man trying to fly. The glass wall didn't offer privacy. Everyone could see Darren pacing inside, shirt half untucked, tie looped around his neck like a noose waiting for tension. The VP burst in. You could only hear part of it over the hum and panic, but the words hit like live wires. "Why wasn't this foreseen?" Darren stopped moving, just froze, pale, face slack with realization. Then he spun toward the door and bellowed, "Get her back!" The room went silent. Not because they didn't want to obey, but because they knew. Everyone did. She was gone. And the floor? It stayed frozen. The problem wasn't just regulatory, it was structural. You don't just plug in a new compliance officer and expect the system to treat them like they've been there all along. These platforms ran on trust chains, built, verified, and reaffirmed across quarters, audits, partner reports. You yank the node at the center and the entire chain throws an exception. That's what the system did now. Exception 43B, no officer of record. Escalated hold. Clearing couldn't move anything. Traders couldn't execute. Clients were watching. And Darren, he was trapped inside a glass box of his own making, realizing too late that his power was performative, just noise built on signatures he didn't understand. They tried calling my number 3 times. I watched it buzz once, face down on my counter while I stirred soup. Calm, no theatrics. The 4th time, they didn't even bother with the phone. They tried email. Subject line, urgent. Critical compliance support request. I didn't open it. There was nothing left to say. Nothing they could offer that would unfreeze what they'd broken. By 6:02 p.m., the board was alerted. By 6:15, legal had initiated external counsel. And by 6:31, an emergency investor call was scheduled for the next morning. Topic line, operational interruption and exposure review. Darren didn't attend the prep call. He was still in his office holding the clause, still trying to find a way to blame the system, the staff, the board, anyone but the man who fired the linchpin, the man who signed the clause, the man who traded institutional memory for a buzzword. The last words I'd said to him echoed back louder now than they had that morning. Value? That's exactly what you're about to pay. And the bill had only just begun to print. It came on a Tuesday. I was at the gate, coffee in one hand, carry-on under the other, about to board a flight to Portland. Not for work, not for some triumphant investor roundtable. Just a quiet trip with a friend who'd once told me years ago, "You stay too long in places that don't deserve you." My phone buzzed. A message from Alex, the last risk analyst left at Norham I still halfway trusted. Check page 37 of the quarterly. Last footnote. Attached was the PDF, Norham Capital Q3 earnings report. I opened it without rush, scanned the usual corporate self-congratulations. Strong YOY momentum, streamlined cost centers, strategic reinvestment of capital gains. Then, near the bottom, past a polite dip in revenue attributed to temporary liquidity constraints, was the line he meant. Footnote 17. Unforeseen compliance departure resulted in a one-time operational penalty and compensation disbursement. That was it. No name, no event breakdown, no reference to the trading freeze, no mention of the $120 million lock, no explanation of the disbursement. But I knew. So did Alex. His follow-up text came seconds later. That's the quietest 2.4M payout I've ever seen. I smiled. No reply needed. I saved the PDF, dropped it into my private archive under a folder labeled Norham, Final, and tagged the last spreadsheet. Closed. There wouldn't be headlines. Darren wasn't important enough to scandalize. Norham would survive, reshuffle, replace titles with new ones that sounded progressive. The board would pretend nothing burned down. HR would revise offboarding protocol. Darren, if he was lucky, would be transitioned to advisory. But that footnote? That was the real eulogy. A single line that admitted the truth without ever daring to speak it out loud. They called me non-core, deadweight, replaceable, then paid millions to plug the hole I left. I took a sip of coffee. Overhead, the boarding line began to move. No fame, no applause, no vindictive last act. Just a woman walking onto a plane, while the system behind her quietly admitted they never understood the value until it was gone.